My name is Yvette Chevalier, your host of the first episode of Beyond the Gavel, recorded in fabulous Las Vegas by Studio LV. Beyond the Gavel is a program designed to reach out to the community to help educate you on the laws and expectations of the judicial system. My name is Yvette Chevalier, and I'll be your host throughout these programs. Today's topic is battery domestic violence, covered by Nevada Revised Statute 200.485. What is domestic violence? Domestic violence is use of force unwanted against a familial person in your family, in a relationship with you, in your home. Unlike regular battery, domestic violence has two requirements. One, that it be unwanted force, and two, that it involves someone in your home. Domestic violence involves two elements. One is the use of physical force that of course is unwanted, and two is that it be towards someone who you have a familial relationship with. That can include a spouse, a child, a roommate, a lover, a boyfriend or girlfriend that is staying in your home. Unlike regular battery, domestic violence involves someone who you have a relationship with in a close proximity. The kind of physical force that constitutes domestic violence can involve many types of actions, such as hitting, pushing, shoving, biting, burning, choking, spitting at, throwing things at, hitting a moving car. All of those types of physical actions can constitute domestic violence. The type of penalties that domestic violence brings for a first offense is usually 1 year, up to 1 year of imprisonment, potentially, as well as a fine of up to $1,000. And it requires community service for those convicted, as well as domestic violence classes. Usually on a first offense, it's a misdemeanor if there was not severe violence involved, such as strangulation or use of a weapon. On a second offense, it is also a misdemeanor, but usually the penalties are more severe. It's 1 year of instruction, preventing domestic violence and educating perpetrators or those convicted of domestic violence, and the fine is heavier and 10 days of jail time. Usually the jail time is suspended unless, of course, the person fails to attend the classes or complete their community service or gets into trouble during the time their case is open. On a third offense, normally that is a felony, and the type of felony depends on the severity of the injury to the victim. That felony can carry more than a year in prison, somewhere between 3 and 5 years of imprisonment, and $10,000 fine, and a felony on your record. Usually a Class C felony if there wasn't strangulation or violence, severe violence, disfigurement, and severe harm, and a Class B felony if there was. I'd like to highlight for you the type of penalties that are involved in domestic violence. To be sure, judges are not allowed to issue probation, although they can issue a suspended sentence that requires the accused, the convicted, to finish a certain coursework, community service, pay fines, and attend classes and such. They are not allowed to dismiss the actions or reduce the charges unless the prosecution really has no evidence. Very important you know, probation is not an option when you are accused and convicted of domestic violence. So what are the defenses to domestic violence, battery domestic violence? One defense is that of self-defense. A person is permitted to use reasonable force, that which would avoid injury to self or others, in order to prevent injury to self or others. Reasonable force means something that is not severe, but just commensurate with a self-defense act. That is one. Two would be accident. If you accidentally slam the door and your spouse's hand is in the door jamb and it was an accident, that does not normally constitute domestic violence. The other is fabrication of facts. Oftentimes people get into disputes and one person will make up facts and accuse the other, even self-injure themselves so that there is evidence of an injury, call the police, and then accuse the other person of domestic violence. That is more difficult to prove, but with a good lawyer, medical evidence could show that an injury is self-inflicted if it was not inflicted by yourself. Lastly, if the prosecution has weak facts, not beyond a reasonable doubt, then your case can be dismissed. And that would usually be proven with an attorney. Very difficult to defend yourself in a domestic violence action when there's a police report or some evidence of injury. What about if you don't live in Las Vegas, or you travel to Las Vegas and are accused of domestic violence? Many people don't realize that there's actually an interstate federal domestic violence charge that can be vetted by the federal court system. And that would involve a person, A, who traveled to or from Las Vegas or caused another to travel to or from Las Vegas while committing domestic violence. And it does also require that the people involved be married, involved boyfriend or girlfriend, or in a sexual relationship. Those charges can then be levied through the U.S. prosecutor's office, not the district attorney locally. What if the victim recants and wants to drop the charges? Actually, it doesn't matter if the victim wants to drop the charges if the prosecution believes they have enough evidence to move forward. The prosecution may look to the original 911 call, the original hospital visit or medical report, and photos that the police officers took during the incident report, and use that to move forward in prosecuting the domestic violence, even if the victim decides not to show up to court, even if subject to a subpoena, or recants on the stand and denies that any domestic violence took place. When the prosecution has sufficient evidence, they are not allowed to drop that case, and they're also not allowed to lower the charges to something other than battery domestic violence unless they surely have not enough facts to prosecute. Many people don't realize that a family scuffle could end up impacting their custody over their minor children. The consequences can be severe and last a very long time. For example, it is not acceptable to use force in ways that in the past was acceptable. For example, when couples fight, they're not allowed to pull hair, bite, slap the way in the past people did maybe 50 years ago. Now, those acts are considered domestic violence. And once you're convicted of domestic violence, even if it's for pulling someone's hair in the relationship, that parent who is convicted will no longer be deemed by a family court in the event of a divorce and dispute for child custody as the preferred parent to have primary custody. So when you're convicted of domestic violence, it's very important that once the 7 years have passed by, if it was a misdemeanor, that you undertake the act of sealing your records. And also that you consider that times have changed and using acts like pulling hair and slapping are no longer acceptable in today's times. Another issue of importance to consider is that of how domestic violence affects immigration status. In families that are convicted of domestic violence, if someone is a foreigner and not a U.S. citizen, it's a double or triple whammy actually. That conviction can actually cause the person to be deported from the United States to their country of origin. It's very important that families realize that domestic violence can cause deportation and also eliminate the possibility of these convicted persons from becoming U.S. citizens in the future or legal residents. Important to get a lawyer and have representation so that that conviction can be ameliorated if possible. If your family is the victim of domestic violence, it's important for you to get help. Contact the hotline through TADC SafeNest or dial 311 for non-emergency for the police department and report those crimes. If you need legal assistance and cannot afford it, contact Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada. Thank you for watching the first episode of Beyond the Gavel. Tune in next week when we cover the topic of record sealing. Leave your questions or comments below and subscribe to this channel. Email me for any additional questions. Thank you.